Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Beyond the Pivot podcast, a podcast that brings you all the exciting news across the African continent about entrepreneurship. We bring you the entrepreneurs that are emerging, bring you investors, and we bring you people that are doing awesome stuff within the entrepreneurial landscape across the continent. And today, we're super excited to have Owen with us here from Gemini Capital Partners, which is committed and dedicated to empowering entrepreneurs in Liberia. And Owen, welcome to the Beyond the Pivot podcast.
Thanks for having me. We really appreciate it.
Awesome. Please kick it off and help us know who is Owen and what's your background and how did you get to Gemini Capital Partners? I know that's a loaded question, right?
Yeah, very much so because, man, the history is kind of crazy, but I'll keep it short and sweet. I am Owen Harmon. I am from and raised in Liberia on the most part, and I was a victim of the first coup d'etat of our country. So I left there when I was young to the U.S. under some crazy, very challenging conditions, but managed to survive the initial stages of migrating into a foreign country and not having a lot of opportunities because it was really sort of like I said, challenging conditions in which we left Liberia when I was a kid. Anyway, long story short, just went to school, high school, college in New York, and actually after high school, the family decided to go back to Liberia because things have calmed down after the coup. And that was back in '85. Shortly after getting back, bam, another uprising happened, so we had to leave again. So that just became even more fun because it was like, okay, here we go again. So eventually found my way from New York to California, did my, sort of schooling and the rest of sort of my education up on that end, and actually finished up on that side. And it was then I started to sort of find my footing as far as where I wanted to be and what I wanted to do. But when I left Liberia when I was a kid, I remember growing up in a very, very great economy and a great situation, and I knew that it was something I always wanted to experience. And at some point in time when things sort of got improved, and so I kept that in mind professionally. But eventually, I sort of got into Barclays Global Investors, which was at that time was the asset management division of Barclays Bank in the UK, and that's when I quickly realized that finance was my calling per se. So worked for Barclays for about 8 years, managed to actually relocate from San Francisco to Georgia. And I was in business development in Georgia for a few years before we got bought up by BlackRock. So after that, it was a sort of a pivotal decision. Did I want to sort of stay, in finance in the U.S., or should I just take my little package that I received and sort of try the whole Africa thing? Because it was, at that point in time, I was like, okay, it's either now or never. So in San Francisco, I actually worked across the street from my cousin and partner right now, Joseph Creighton, and we used to have lunches and meet up and talk about, all right, hey, when are we going back? When are we going to go check things out back home? Because at that point in time, the country had sort of we had just come out of the wars in the early 90s, and Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, the first female African president, was elected, and so she was there trying to eradicate our debt and trying to get things back to sort of livable and survivable conditions at the time. So it was I think it was a very important time for us to sort of decide if we were going to do Liberia again and sort of give it a shot from just an investment perspective and just to try things out and see how the whole landscape was going to look. So at that point in time, after deciding that, hey, I don't want to do corporate again, I'm just going to go ahead and pilot the whole Africa investment Liberia thing and at least go in there and give it a fair shot. That's how I ended up sort of coming back to, or repatriating, if you want to say it, back to Liberia. And that's when the whole journey of Gemini sort of began. Initially, my cousin and I, we made a couple of trips checking out the landscape and decided that we were going to definitely give it a shot. So initially, we went in there as private investors, looking at individual opportunities, and that was a kind of a big disaster, simply because we went in there very green, and we were just not really, as we call it, we didn't have our MBA in being in Africa yet. So we learned some hard lessons, took some losses in some individual projects. I mean, we invested into a palm oil plantation, which was a complete disaster. We lost about $500,000 in that investment simply because of the logistics involved and just understanding how we do things in Africa from a work perspective, and a lot of lessons learned. So that's pretty much takes me to kind of where I am right now with the whole journey in Liberia and with Gemini. So yeah.
I mean, that had to be not a small package if you just mentioned that you lost $500,000 on the Palm expedition. So
no, the package wasn't that. Trust me.
Okay.
It wasn't that. It was a combination of investors. There was a few of us that sort of joined in for this one, but it was kind of like over time, just sort of bleeding cash into it and just not getting the returns from it. But yeah, it was a lesson learned, and I think it was an important lesson for us to sort of take that step moving forward.
So if you describe Liberia when you like first time came back, not the first time when you had to flee again, but the first time after like you said you're gonna give it a shot, into what it is now. What do you think are the main differences now, like in those years?
Night and day, simply because it's taken, about 15, 20 years for us to sort of understand the dynamics of being a peaceful nation and to sort of put aside our past to sort of start working together to sort of figure out that, the country needs improvement in a lot of different areas in the right administration, of course. So I think right now, we're in a much better place as far as understanding what it takes to sort of regrow a nation and to pretty much put ourselves on a sort of world stage as, okay, we're beyond the whole fighting and war mentality. We're focused on growing a country. So right now, I think it's a lot better environment for anyone who wants to sort of take that step.
And just so we're clear, Gemini isn't an extension of Google AI, right?
No. We were first. We came first. I think we came first, maybe, but at least for Liberia, yes, Gemini was just an idea and a concept without any association with Google. It'd be nice if we can, sort of do some sort of partnership and we can sort of ride the sort of wave of that, that concept or that name. But, we'll have a talk with Google at some point in time. Yeah.
We hope that happens. And so what I'd like to find out, Owen, is I think, so when we look at our audience, we have two types of audiences that could be in a particular similar situation to where you were at the time you're trying to make the decision to come back home, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's one part, people that have left the continent and would like to come back home. But we have another set of our audience, which is they haven't been to Africa or experienced Africa.
Yes.
But they are still looking at the opportunity to invest in Africa. Could you maybe speak to, I know you've mentioned some challenges, which is the losing of the investment, but what specific opportunities were you looking at within the West African system that I think gave you the, hey, we're going to do this?
Absolutely. So, there were a lot of positives that we felt that it was worth the risk. Obviously, at that point in time, that was probably maybe about 10, 15 years ago when we started looking at those opportunities. It was a very green, sort of green opportunities there. A lot of startup opportunities, a lot of sort of a wide open market for services and products that were in first worlds or in sort of the Western societies that we feel that could definitely migrate or that definitely could translate into success in the West African market as well. So sort of, I guess, reinventing the wheel. We had a lot of ideas from our experiences abroad that we felt like, okay, well, let's look at the landscape. Let's see how we can sort of maybe even start looking at partnering with entrepreneurs with ideas and see how we can sort of bring online, some of these services catered towards the market, but also catered towards being able to scale. So the opportunities were fantastic. I mean, in various sectors, energy, agribusiness, for example, even in farming, mechanized farming, because we're still doing things the traditional way. We still are, in a lot of cases, doing things the traditional way, but looking at various means of just improving sort of how we do business and also looking at how we can sort of create, opportunities so we can actually start to connect with the world or connect with growth and, like I said earlier, just sort of scaling into, the broader economies and, and especially in the, I guess you can say in the sort of West Africa region, if you want to call it that. But yeah, there were a lot of opportunities that we saw and that we felt like, hey, we can definitely take advantage of, and we shouldn't let the risk of failure stop us.
So what did you do with that $500,000 lesson afterwards? Did you continue in agriculture or did you take a different opportunity afterwards?
Well, it led us to actually sort of mitigating our sort of individual investment risks to say, okay, well, maybe we can actually look at creating a fund and sort of, I guess, if you want to call it, just, utilizing the failures and the lack of success in how we approach the whole investment, environment. And then just use, if you hate to say this, but use other people's money as a sort of basis of investing. And that way we can obviously maybe even at some point in time look at our whole investment strategy and the way we go about putting that investment into work, and just literally realizing that there's a lot of due diligence and a lot of sort of checks we have to put into place moving forward, simply because we realize how risky the environment could be. So yeah, it was that 500,000 loss was definitely a key for us to figure out how we change our strategy a little bit.
So what do you think is the something that a person like me should be worried about? Because I like about Liberia and Sierra Leone that they are both English speaking countries.
Yes.
Compared to everybody else in Western Africa, Ghana, Nigeria, I suppose, but like Benin and Guinea and Senegal and so on. So it's kind of like island where I can actually move around. I can understand people time to time. What should be the first steps when an outsider like me comes in and has the same mindset as you did in the beginning?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you never want to go into a situation completely blind, right? You don't want to ever just pack your bags and go to a foreign country without understanding the landscape. So obviously, first thing, thanks to the internet, start doing your research. Start looking at, obviously, the government structure, look at ways that the government has sort of put in place, things that have been implemented to sort of improve the environment for foreign investors coming in. Obviously, connect with the folks in the chamber, start having connections with partners on the ground per se. I mean, even if it's a cold call, or even looking at what other organizations are doing in these countries, and say, okay, well, this is a start. Things are in a positive, going in a positive direction. Make sure there's no sort of bulletins of terror or all kinds of crazy stuff that would prevent you from doing business in the country. But also, look at some indexes. Look at the country readiness to do business and those things like that. There's usually a lot of media out there now, especially LinkedIn, a lot of associations, a lot of firms that will put out, basically a good message as far as how a particular country is ready to do business. And I think at some point in time, just maybe dab in and out, doing some small projects here and there. Like I said, after you link up with maybe a couple of local organizations, then you figure out, okay, well, things are pretty steady. Maybe see if you can get onto the sort of the country's, sort of websites as far as from the government, outputs like Commerce and Ministry and places like that will sort of have indicators of how well the GDP and other indicators are doing, as far as at least from an economic perspective as well. And also from a social perspective, obviously you want to keep up with government agencies to see how things are coming along socially. And then once you have that in place and you get a little sort of a comfort for maybe just kind of tracking how things are coming along, then I think at some point in time, if you have a connection or two that you can maybe just sort of say, hey, I want to come visit. I want to come check out the landscape. Take a trip. And I'll mention that later on when we talk about what it takes for investors to be comfortable coming into the country. I think at some point in time, you just have to say, hey, I'm going to come out there for a week or two, have set up meetings and just come and check out the environment myself, as opposed to relying on other lenses or the internet or social media or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, at some point in time, after you've done your due diligence and monitored how the country's progressing, if you feel like there's an appetite there, just hop on a plane, take a trip. That's usually the best way of getting an idea of how things will go as far as kind of coming into a particular situation like that.
I understand that it could be very hard to say, because I assume all the indicators are fine, otherwise you wouldn't be there. It's a very safe country. And is there any specialization you would say that Liberia is now specializing, let's say, in agribusiness, or are they specializing in minerals, or kind of value add business? Like, how's the ecosystem looking?
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, as far as outputs for the country, areas that they specialize in, obviously mining is a big sector for us. There are concessions in place with ArcelorMittal that they're actually upscaling their operations, and they're I think right now in the middle of a 25-year session contract. There's obviously rubber, sort of the core products that's been driving the GDP in Liberia for example for many years. Agriculture is still big, so that's somewhere that, depending on what you want to go into, cocoa or something like that, that's still there, simply because we have all the arable land and concessions already set up in place from the past regimes. So those are your core opportunities, but then obviously there are others coming online, definitely in the tech sector, in the sort of financial services sector as well, simply because because of the shift right now in demand or the shift in sort of positioning in those particular sectors. So yeah, this is wide open right now. If you want to kind of come in and look at, even light manufacturing, for example, that's sort of coming online simply because not all raw materials should be exported. So I think the private sector and government, they're trying to make sort of a conscious effort to make sure that, we're starting to, have some factories there, some manufacturing there, so that jobs and, the economy is, the money stays within the economy itself. So yeah, there are a lot of opportunities there. And once you're on the ground, I think once you meet with, Commerce, or you meet with our, investment commission, or level, they'll definitely be able to sort of give you a better sort of idea as far as the areas that you can invest in once you come into the country. Because it's shifted so much now, it's changed up a lot over the last few years, but then it's just, like I said, it's still wide open as far as all the opportunities there.
And maybe I would like to double click
Sure.
on what you just said, Owen, and just learn about more your work now in investment.
Mm-hmm.
What has been your overall investment philosophy, and where exactly are you looking in terms of sectors? Are you just focused in Liberia right now, or are you looking towards the entire continent as well?
So basically, when Gemini was formed and structured, we basically started out in Liberia and Sierra Leone as two markets that we were going to sort of divide and conquer, if you want to call it that, simply because those two economies are very mirror images of each other, and the connectivity is there between both countries. Historically, socially, anything that happens in Liberia or Sierra Leone seems to affect the other country as well. So it's, as far as the investment philosophy there, Gemini itself was targeting, and this has always been the case, targeting sort of SME startup opportunities where we would obviously look at the entrepreneur, look at the sort of the investment environment, and see if there was an alignment in place where we felt like, okay, well, this opportunity is worth investing into, and we can then at some point in time start having conversations with that potential entrepreneur and just decide if it's something that we were going to be interested in. And this has been the case for the last, since 2017 when Gemini was formed. However, we're actually fundraising for a sort of a green and innovation fund, as we call it, particularly, targeting agribusiness and climate change type of opportunities. And with that, we're actually looking at broadening our spectrum within West Africa, going into possibly Ghana, Nigeria, Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, and doing more sort of co-investing, if the opportunity comes up in those particular markets.
Perfect. And there's one interesting conversation I always like to have. You've talked about the SMEs and the startups, right? And I think for the startups, it's brilliant. I think the model for investments and scaling startups is very clear, which is usually the venture capital route, right? But I think, and you can tell me this, but I constantly mention that there's still huge opportunities for even non-tech businesses to really scale and grow within most of Africa's economies.
Yes.
How do you differentiate the type of investment that you offer to startups and that goes towards traditional businesses like SMEs?
We kind of just keep a sort of a clear lens on that, simply because we look at more of the entrepreneur and sort of the appetite of that particular investment as far as the growth potential, simply because we don't want to come in with a closed-minded approach when we're talking to investors and investing companies. And we realize that, there is the fintech aspect, and then there are also traditional aspects, but we also have to make sure that it fits within our philosophy, which more likely than not, we are looking at, okay, so how can we connect with the ecosystem, or how can this particular investment create impact or create jobs, for women, youth, et cetera, et cetera. So we have a specific criteria that we look at for all investments, and that we want to make sure that we check the box on most of those, simply because we have, investors that have criteria as well. We don't really differentiate between, the sort of the hot or the sort of the, what's driving, investments right now, as opposed to just the, all of our sort of key components that we look at from an investment approach. So we really don't differentiate between the two, but we will look at both as equally important, because at some point in time, traditional investing versus what's happening in the fintech and other hot, if you want to call it hot investment environment, those two will ultimately at some point in time merge, and they will, require one needing the other as far as growth and market opportunities are concerned.
Makes sense. What type of investment are you offering? Both equity and debt, and what are average ticket sizes in your investment?
Exactly. So it's kind of a tale of two tapes. So for our pilot fund, when we first got funded for that, and we were looking at the opportunities, we had sort of the if you want to call it the private equity slash debt debt component. So we were looking at sort of a mix of both, if you want to call it that, because the equity aspect was important to us simply because we wanted to make sure that we were really we had some stake in say so as far as how to drive the business from a growth perspective. Not simply because we wanted to own the investment. We wanted just to make sure that we had seats at the board and at the table as far as making some crucial decisions simply because of our expertise. We were partnering with some investors, investee companies or entrepreneurs that may not necessarily understand the full picture or the growth trajectory that we were looking at. So we basically decided that we were going to do a sort of a mix of equity and debt in our initial investment. Now we've sort of I think we've looked at, after trying that model a couple of times, we realized that entrepreneurs aren't really comfortable with equity on the most part. They don't understand the structures. They always feel like, hey, you know what, these guys are coming in to take over our business, kind of thing like that. So, we decided that maybe more of a straight debt option would be something that we would consider doing. So moving forward on our new fund that we're trying to raise capital for, we will definitely highlight mostly straight debt as an investment option. And as far as ticket size go, to answer that part, that as well, we pivoted on that a little bit because our initial pilot fund the ticket ceiling was a little higher, starting at $250,000 to $300,000 to $1 million. But with this new fund, we're looking at $50,000 being the lower ceiling and up to $1 million, just to keep the threshold pretty vast, if you want to call it that.
Sounds good. And just in case I missed it, Owen, what was the size of the initial fund and the second fund that you currently
So the size of the initial fund, same number. The initial fund size was $50 million we were fundraising for, but what happened was we never actually closed on that initial fund simply because just to take it a step back, we initially got $1.25 million for our pilot sort of project that was facilitated through the Dutch Good Growth Fund, DGGF as they're called, and that was sort of our initial funding from them, and that was really to first prove ourselves in a brand new market as far as us being also a brand new sort of fund managers as well. So they said, okay, well, let's see what you guys can do. And the idea at that point in time was to invest that sort of capital into startup companies, into at least to give us some sort of attraction. And while we were raising, the $50 million, and COVID happened, so, we were actually about to close on the $50 million, and we were never able to get to a close because of COVID. So all of the investors at that point in time, as you all know, everything sort of shut down and everyone sort of took a wait and see approach to see how things would come out after COVID happened. And so that left us with our initial investment into with the pilot fund into our pilot companies, which since then we as Gemini Capital has been sustaining all the operational costs on that, and also just trying to groom those portfolio companies to make sure again that the traction is there and to show our investors that without capital from them, we can still sort of sustain. And again, that's part of the whole NBA Africa experience that we're sort of putting on display, to be honest. So yeah, that was that idea. And then now this particular fund that we're trying to fundraise for this Green Innovation Fund, that's also a $50 million target, and we've gotten some traction on that so far. So we're just trying to continue to fundraise and hopefully we can get to a close by the end of the year on that.
What I learned before is that raising the amount between $50,000 and $1 million is usually the hardest, at least in Africa, because then you can.
Yes, it is.
There are funds that provide $2 million or more, but there are also funds that provide $25,000 ticket. But the space in between is very hard. So how did you pick this gap on purpose, or that you also saw this opportunity for these ticket sizes, or was that a different reason there?
The opportunity for the ticket sizes is simply because we feel like that's sort of like the sweet spot for startups and also for companies that might already be in existence, that might have a little bit of cash flow, but looking to grow and get to the next level. So the $50 to $1 million, we feel like that's usually a common ask, simply because of the position of, companies that are in business or startups that are looking into sort of getting into or starting up particular operations, but then will need capital to sort of grow and get to the next level. And the reason why I say that is simply because our philosophy is, okay, say if we in a particular deal where it's $350,000, we typically won't give you all of that up front, or we'll say, okay, well, let's have tranche-based approach and also attach that to milestones. So we would say, okay, well, here's 350. So do you need, inventory? Do you need working capital, et cetera, et cetera? Let's map that out for the first maybe $100,000 or $150,000 and put that to work. And then we revisit in 6 months or a year later the returns on that, revisit the gaps or the need for more funding, or have milestones been met. And if the milestones have been met, then we say, okay, well, you were looking good, time to infuse the next $100,000 where you can get from a particular stage and then grow to another stage. So we feel like that number is a sweet spot. And like you said, it's a tough position to get capital simply because in Africa, you're usually go into a bank, if you can at all, to get 25,000 or 50. Most banks will not give first-time startups, especially without collateral, any of that kind of money. It's hard to raise that from angel investors, and it's even harder to get that from family and friends. So usually that, getting $50,000 is difficult. So we felt that would be a nice sweet spot for us to come in and to be able to provide that startup capital, and then to have that threshold in place where we can increase that to a particular amount just as the business is growing.
And since you said you divide the investment into tranches, I'm wondering also if you partner up on investment, perhaps if there is some kind of angel investment network in Liberia, or you take people from Nigeria or Cote d'Ivoire to participate in it, or how does this work essentially?
Absolutely. Yeah, we really keep those options open simply because, like I mentioned, we're trying to sort of expand into West Africa. So we're always having conversations with other investors in Ghana, for example. We have a Ghanaian firm and another Ghanaian individual that's interested in partnering with us and bringing in basically some working capital and some cash into one of our investments called Boxco. And that really kind of keeps us, again, risk averse, but then also the whole co-investment idea is something that we really relish simply because it allows us to be able to, get access to a network of partners, outside of Liberia and outside of Sierra Leone. So the co-investment approach is really important to us simply because, to be honest, we don't have the capital to open up a brand new office in Ghana or Nigeria at this stage and just start cold with fundraising or getting to understand the environment, in those countries. We just don't have the bandwidth for that right now. So we really will welcome, opportunities from, investors as well from, those local countries, and then come in and then we'll do a partnership as far as being able to infuse cash into a particular opportunity together. And that way we can, again, grow that network from there.
So even if somebody from Zambia now listening writes you a nice email, or just West Africa is your...
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. We do a lot of sort of investor type conferences and et cetera throughout Africa and Europe as well. And those conversations always come up with those who are interested in coming into Liberia because let's be honest, Ghana and Nigeria, they're getting a bit saturated. So they're looking at expanding into unproven markets or greener markets like Liberia or Sierra Leone. So there are a lot of interest in potential local investors from those countries coming into our economies as well. So yeah, definitely that conversation is always open for to have.
I would like to learn more about any success stories that you have also with your investments currently, right? And also the challenges as well. That entrepreneur that just ran away with your, 100K.
Well,
what have been some of the successes and challenges that you've experienced there?
Well, let's start with our first. I already mentioned the whole palm oil investment, which was more of an individual sort of problem. But from the fund perspective, actually our first investment was with, didn't go well. It didn't really go well. Initially, we thought it was a good fit with the team that, the entrepreneurs that actually had this business. We were having a lot of cash flow issues, a lot of back office type, reporting issues where some of the numbers weren't matching up. And eventually, and it was our first investment, and we thought we did our due diligence. We thought everything was in place, but it just wasn't a good fit because at the end of the day, the philosophies between the management team that we partner with and us, it turned out to be very different. So in essence, we had to shut things down simply because we had a majority stake in that particular company, and we were looking at right now rebranding and looking at sort of how we can save that investment. But as of right now, it didn't go well. But the success story side of it is this opportunity that that's thriving right now is called Cola Digital Finance, and it's actually a grassroots opportunity started up by all females and in-house. And so we put the team together, and they have been phenomenal in sort of developing this whole app, which basically is a digital finance services app that does remittances, that does e-money for different various services, that has a lot of potential to sort of address the whole e-market, e-money gaps within the countries as far as doing wallets and, like I said, remittances already, and other services that's related to sort of digital finance. So really excited. It's a fintech opportunity. We were in, 2 years in sort of production of the app. We feel that the app is ready to go. We've actually done some extensive marketing the past few months to get it to market, and we're looking at actually expanding into Sierra Leone and also into the U.S. simply because it's going to require a lot of sort of the diaspora, to buy in and to be able to help drive, revenues from just being able to use services. So yes, that was the bad, and that's the good, and they were both from our sort of our pilot investments, and we're at least happy to be able to explain to our investors that we do have a success story in place, and stay tuned. We're trying to get it to hopefully within the next year or two to a $20 million valuation landmark, so that other investors can maybe come in and actually take us to the next level. So yeah, that's Cola Digital Services right now is a definite success story in Liberia for sure.
Thanks for sharing that. And
you welcome.
So I'm curious. I'm like, this Owen, this guy loses money and keeps the smile on his face. I guess it's because of the success stories that we have, right? That gives you.
Well, and fortunately for my cousin and I, since we're the partners here, we've had other businesses, individually that we've invested in as well, because it's very important when you go into Africa that you sort of diversify your portfolio. I'm sure you've heard this before, that you're always trying to look at revenue streams from different angles, and so we were able to at least secure some other revenue streams outside of the fund that to keep us sustained, and obviously being able to infuse some of that into the fund itself or into those opportunities, because at the end of the day, we are determined, we are very determined to make sure that at the end of the day, that the success stories are a lot more than the failures. And the reason is because we're not only about returns, we're also about impact. So we want to make sure that when our legacies sort of examined or it's brought about, that we have done everything in our power to make sure that we are a positive influence and positive success story in the whole investment environment in Liberia and hopefully in other countries that we do investments in.
And thank you for that. It's very refreshing, the honesty, that you talk also about the bad and good and the lessons and so on. It's not just a bunch of phrases. And I wanted to ask, maybe it's common secret that Kabila works for Bongo Hive. It's this accelerator innovation space where a lot of these startups are getting birth in Zambia, let's say. I don't know a better word. So I was wondering, in Liberia, is there a similar innovation ecosystem where you can learn, or the startups can get mentoring, can be kind of held their hand for the first couple months, or is it just you have to hunt them down in the university and maybe even on the street and so on?
That's an excellent question, simply because that was our initial issue when we first entered into the Liberian market. When we started fundraising and started looking for opportunities, there just weren't, sort of incubators and accelerators out there that were, potential investees, entrepreneurs to get them to the level that for investments. So over the years, that's, there are one or two that we can identify that's been doing a better job in sort of creating that landscape for us. But in general, in Liberia, more so, it's been, hey, you know what, it'll come out here and there that there's a private equity firm out there that will be looking at opportunities. It turns into a word of mouth situation, and then we've also have been more proactive about doing investment conferences, just partnering with organizations, government, and per se to basically be more visible for entrepreneurs to see us as maybe, hey, let's go talk to these guys. And then also we've we as Gemini have also done a better job in sort of setting up sort of forums and sort of, if you want to call it, workshops that we partner with a couple of people there that kind of have these sort of, hey, if you want to be investment ready, learn about your back office, learn about marketing, understand all these things that come along with being at least being to the point where you would be considered investment ready. So when the opportunity comes about, that we can take you seriously and have that conversation at the level in which we expect. So that gap is being addressed. But in Sierra Leone, I have to say they've done a far much better job about that whole space, because when we started, before COVID, when we started looking into going there, we connected with Innovation SL, led by Francis Stevens George. He's kind of like the godfather, the incubation space over there. And it was clear over there that they made that more of a conscious effort, although it was more private sector driven at that time. But there were more hubs in place for startups and to kind of get them to be more investment ready. And I think they're much further along than Liberia is right now.
Yeah, the sourcing is kind of difficult, but you said you work with different countries, different angel investor groups and venture capital firms. But I assume in a lot of these countries, the problem is the currency. I invest in dollars, but then I have to turn it into a Liberian dollar or a kwacha and so on, and that is losing its value. So is that an issue that also the startups are looking at? Because I saw somebody trying to address it with cryptocurrency, or different methods, so they can keep the value. And since you had a study about e-money and repatriation of funds, I'm kind of curious how that works, because you have a little bit more insight than average Joe.
Yeah, so Liberia is a unique sort of a investment environment simply because we actually have a dual currency system there. We actually have the US dollar is very active in the market, as well as the LD. And the LD is the Liberian dollar, which came about back in the sort of the mid 1980s. For more sort of, I guess, high value, sustainable type investments, we will do everything on the most part in the US currency. So dollar to dollar, doesn't really lose its value there. It's usually at the sort of the lower tier of just using money in, for smaller type, purchases or smaller type sort of economy drivers that the LD will come into play. But on the most part, when you're investing into Liberia, it'll be in the US dollar, and you don't have to worry about any FX situations there. Now, Sierra Leone is a different ballgame to me, because the Leone's is the currency that's used as opposed to the US dollars. Everything on the most part locally they're done in Leone. So you definitely have to look at some sort of instruments in place, or strategies in place to sort of mitigate the FS risk. So it's two different. That's the one area I think that both countries sort of vary as far as that goes. And for us in Liberia, we feel really comfortable with investing in the US dollar simply because it's not going to lose its value in sort of transactional type exposures and things like that.
I just wanted to find out, especially on the sourcing of the startups, right? I think you've talked about Francis and the entrepreneur ecosystem. I think you mentioned the aspect of conferences as well.
Yes.
I see how those could be potential platforms that give you at least some pipeline for startups that you could be looking at. Are there any other unique techniques, or at least strategies that you've looked at to find at least those high quality startups that you think are really investment worthy in the markets you operate in?
Really, honestly, right now, that's kind of the limitation of that. The investment conferences are really helpful. They're really great to me because it sort of brings out, all of the ones in hiding. Even if they're in attendees or in the audience, when these pitch competitions happen, again, it's in Sierra Leone especially, they're really good about having pitch competitions. A lot of local investors will, kind of have funding and prizes in place for top 3 or 4 winners, and it just brings out sort of that mentality for a local talent to sort of show up. And once they show up and they see that, hey, there are opportunities for at least to get seed capital, they usually tend to that spreads. Obviously, social media spreads. That definitely helps as well. But as far as just putting the word out and just kind of having the landscape in place where people understand that they're investors looking for opportunities, those are really sort of where things are right now. I mean, there are also some, I guess, products that are supposed to be coming online on the fintech side that will be out there for potential entrepreneurs to say, okay, well, there's access to capital. Here's how you go about kind of creating your own sort of business opportunities. Again, a lot of that is through networking. A lot of that is through the hubs. So we just want to tap into that. And also, again, when these conferences are happening. And the government, especially in Sierra Leone, even in Liberia for that matter, they're doing a better job as far as recognizing the talent and recognizing the gaps, as far as having at least being able to maybe bring in entrepreneurs from, for different conferences, working with organizations like UNDP, for at least for them to have these sort of sponsored type networking type opportunities and conferences. So I think that's usually the major means of sort of awareness in the investment environment there.
Perfect. And if I could ask, because every entrepreneur or startup founder at whatever stage believes they are ready to receive investment.
Right.
A quick one, which I would like you to maybe point out. What is a quick turnoff for you when you hear entrepreneurs trying to pitch you, and what gets you excited?
The turnoff. It's just that. It's that they, hey, I want to do business. And that's usually, that means what? What does that mean? You said, because usually after when I'm attending a particular conference or just participated in that space, I'll usually get one or two folks come up to me and say, hey, I want to do business. And then we start having a conversation, and then we realize that you're not quite ready to do business. And then it's more about, okay, how can we have more of an in-depth conversation as far as what it takes for you to get your idea to life. So I wouldn't call it really a turn-off to me, because I always listen to ideas. I always encourage, let's have the conversation. The fact that you're even thinking about wanting to have an established business or wanting to create or incubate something, that's fantastic. So it's more of just educating and saying, okay, well, if you want to do business, here are the steps. Here's what needs to happen. Here's how you need to approach this. Do you have a business plan? How does that business plan look? Have you really spent some time to think about risk mitigation and everything that comes with a particular idea? So I think I would just say more of the lack of knowledge and understanding what it takes to do a business, simply because I think you have to understand that just simply because you have a business idea doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work. You also have to think about failure, and think about what if that idea doesn't grow legs. So yeah, I just think it's more for me to assess what level of I want to do business conversation, what that conversation is going to sound like and look like, and where you stand with just understanding the basics, being registered, and just again putting some initial capital into it, basically not talking about it, but actually showing that you're willing to sort of take on some of the risk, and also some of the if you want to call it the financing, if you can get to it to start a business. Because a lot of times people feel like that the partnership is you provide capital, as we as the venture capitalists will provide the capital, and that's it. They're not going to do the work, or they're not going to put in their time or effort and things like that. And I think that's like the biggest turnoff. Now on the flip side, speaking of, there's, to me, what basically drives me is meeting with an entrepreneur who's willing to take risks, who's willing to put the work in, who at 2 or 3 a.m. they're working on the processes, they're doing that business plan, they're actually saying, hey, you know what, I'm taking this very seriously, and I will make this a priority over everything else that I'm doing. Yes, I could have a job, or I could be working part-time, but on the most part, I am willing to go out there and put the time and effort in to show that I am ready to take the next step. So if I say, hey, how does your business plan look? And in 2 or 3 days, that business plan is coming to me and it looks good, and I'm saying, okay, well, here's adjustments, or here's some other things that you need to consider. And then 3 or 4 days later, I get that, sort of revised B plan that looks like, those things are being taken care of or being addressed. Then I was like, okay, well, this particular entrepreneur is definitely one that I wouldn't mind investing my time and effort in and my capital in, because I know that they're next level ready. Although the cash may not be there, but they're definitely will take that opportunity and do something with it. So yeah, those kind of like they're kind of work hand in hand, but those are my turn off and turn ons as far as working with potential investees, should I say.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, thank you.
I love it.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask about the NGOs, non-profit groups, because I have never seen so many non-profit groups as I did in Sierra Leone. I suppose the situation in Liberia will be very similar, and a lot of those NGOs are focusing on capacity building and small business creation and so on. At least they claim. What is their success rate is a different story. But I'm kind of curious, how do they play into your efforts? you try to do something commercially, private sector, find those talents, but then there is somebody offering free money if they do a good application, so it's kind of like rival, but also support, so how do you actually see their work in Liberia and other countries that you know of?
Yeah, actually, that's a good question. Simply because, on the most part, depending on the NGO, and obviously how high profile they are, we don't discourage that at all. Because at the end of the day, if you get a grant for technical assistance or something that will complement the funding that we're bringing in to a particular an organization or opportunity, it's capital. And obviously, NGOs have more sort of constraints. Their capital, their funding comes with a lot of instructions and do's and don'ts, if you want to call it that. So obviously, if funding comes in for a particular opportunity and it's specifically tied to a particular set of metrics or milestones, then that needs to be taken care of for that. So we don't really discourage it. However, the concern is, hey, I just got 50,000 US or 25,000 and I'm shutting it down, or I'm not doing anything else, or I'm okay because it's like, okay, this is the money, this is the seed money that I need. And a lot of entrepreneurs don't realize that getting initial capital is sometimes easier than getting growth capital or getting follow-up capital. So a lot of times that the burn on your initial capital, it goes away quickly simply because there's a lot of sort of hidden costs and operational costs that's not seen. So at the end of the day, I think unless you're really in the system where you're going to continue to get grant money, which that's usually not sustainable, you still need to sort of partner with like a Gemini Capital that will be able to sort of be there for additional growth capital, for example. But we don't discourage it because there are a lot of organizations, some legit, some not, that will actually be available, not all the time on time, as far as being able to actually fund that particular entrepreneur. But once that entrepreneur can get cash or can get funding, we definitely won't have a problem with it. We just have our mandates, we have our funding that we need to make sure that it's executed properly once it's given to an entrepreneur. So again, that's why we're more hands-on with our investments.
And looking back on your journey so far, Owen, what's one lesson or insight that you wish you would have known earlier getting into the space?
They are many. But the one thing that if I want to say we should have done better when we first sort of started this journey in Liberia, especially, is I don't think we were loud enough. We were really, the private equity side of it was really private, right? We were really quiet about it because we didn't know how the government, for example, will perceive us sort of coming in that environment. And we didn't want to come in with the stigma of, hey, these guys have money, go see them. And then we get floodgates of everybody just needing cash just because they need cash, as opposed to having, the right mentality of this cash is for an investment, it's not for, for anything else. So we were really quiet. We didn't do much social media postings, and actually we still are guilty of that a little bit. And we just sort of been under the radar on the most part, especially after COVID. COVID kind of set us back a little bit with that whole that process, because at that point in time, it was common knowledge that Gemini Capital was, in Liberia, and we were, looking at potential entrepreneurs to fund. And when COVID happened and and that funding initially dried up, we were like, okay, guys, although you're here, we're not really here. So we had to sort of be less noisy about that. So I think if we would have done a better job in the whole sort of marketing ourselves landscape, I think we would have probably maybe even gotten more funding or be in a position where, we were probably being more sort of further along than we are right now. But with that being said, things happen for a reason. I think it was really good for us to sort of understand the investment environment and also, obviously see if we could strive and make sure that our investment strategy worked. And I think, like I said, although we could have been noisier, I think that, that really helped us to operationally be sound and do what we, basically do what we were supposed to do from an investment perspective.
I want you to speak more about that, Owen, because I think, Martin, we could be guilty of this. Are we loud enough? Not sure, but...
Yeah, no, you have a podcast. You have a podcast, so you're definitely louder. Let's call it that.
I'd like to find out, Owen, right? How exactly did that, if you can give specific examples? I'm making assumptions, and I think you've touched bits of it, which is it from the specific, is it that the feedback you are getting is, hey, we do not know about you, we cannot see any traction of your work within Liberia or Sierra Leone? What were specific challenges that not being loud led to for you?
And that's a great point. You have to realize we're in a market that's a small market that no one really, that has a history of war-torn, that whole mindset of it being infrastructure's not there. And some of it is true. However, the noise is the fact that, hey, well, this is where we started, and this is where things are now, and this is the direction we're heading in. And we do have success stories, and we're looking at sort of building upon that more. So I think, yeah, you're right. It's more of that as opposed to, we just didn't, we're just in a corner and not saying anything. But I think it was just more of an organic loudness, right? Because now when we go to, investment conferences and folks are saying, hey, how's things in Liberia? How's things in Sierra Leone? And how's your traction? How long have you been doing, doing investments there? We can at least say, okay, well, hey, guess what? We haven't been loud. We're not a household name. We're in a smaller market, but this is what we've done. This is what we can show that we've done. And this is what we're looking at doing. And these are some of the partners that we work with. So the fact that we actually have good traction and we're sort of trending in that direction, and especially going into the more of a, West African market, I think, that bodes well for us. And I think, like I said, we weren't loud enough in the beginning, but I think we're definitely trying to take that, take that to the next level, because now we're comfortable and confident that we can execute.
Love that. What's one question that you wish or hoped we could have asked, and hopefully share the insight to that particular question?
That I would have loved to answer is, when is the next investment conference happening in Liberia? And I already know the answer. The answer is in 2 weeks. Well, on the 15th, in a week. This is the second annual private investments or private sector government forum that the government is actually driving. We've done a decent job in promoting that. We have some investors coming in from abroad and from the region, and stating that Liberia is open for business. Now, similar conferences have happened in Sierra Leone. Like I said, they're much further along in getting the word out that they are definitely open for business, and that they were looking at the diaspora and investors to come in to look at the opportunities and the talent there. And I think Liberia is right behind them. So yes, I wish you would have asked when it was our next investment conference that we're participating in, and it's going to be happening in about a week or so. Yeah, and Martin, I know we got a project that we're working on, hopefully in the next few months. So look forward to doing that with you, and maybe you might take the little drive and come to Liberia as well, and come hang out with us over there. But I'm always in Freetown, always in Sierra Leone, so that's kind of my designated position to sort of run the or grow the Sierra Leone market. So I'm always there. So I'm sure we'll cross paths maybe with Francis at some point in time. So looking forward to it. And Kabula, if you can ever come out to see us, please do. And we'll look forward to having you.
Thank you, Owen. I hope we open the floodgates for you also from different markets now. And
Thank you. Thank you very much.
If anybody will be looking forward to learn more about you, we will add websites for Gemini Capital Partners to the episode, but also how else can they reach out to you?
Yeah, I have a LinkedIn profile personally, and we're actually creating a Gemini Capital profile as well on LinkedIn. So all materials like this and other wins and success stories, we'll definitely start uploading that on our LinkedIn page. And we're also working on retooling our websites to include everything that we're trying to do right now. So yeah, like I said, we're just trying to be a little louder with who we are and what we're trying to do. So yeah, my contact information is on LinkedIn as well. So yeah, anytime you're talking with a potential partner or investor or entrepreneur, feel free to share that information.
Sounds good. We will do it, and the floodgates will never close. So thank you very much, Owen, for your time. And
thanks for having me. I really appreciate it, and we look forward to chatting at some point in time in the future.
Thank you very much for watching and listening to the episode with Owen Harmon from Gemini Capital Partners from Liberia all the way to the end. I hope that you learned something, that you discovered how things are going on in Liberia, and we hope that you will join us again during our next episode. To not miss the next episode, please follow us on LinkedIn, on Instagram, follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and YouTube. Here you will find the newest episodes, the shorts from these episodes, and also news about conferences and important events to not miss out on the African continent. We are looking forward to having you again soon. And until that time, do not hesitate to reach out to us if you have any recommendations on the next guest, and to leave a comment under this podcast episode. Take care and good luck to you all.